Welcome everyone to our webinar on results-based project management. My name is Karen Bies and I will be the moderator for today's session. I am here with my colleagues Oliver Schlein and Vincent Odero, and the two of you will present today's topic. But before I hand over to them, let me say a few words on IKI Small Grants. IKI Small Grants is part of Germany's International Climate Initiative. It is funded by the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Climate Action, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, and implemented by GIZ. As you know, at IKI Small Grants, we do not only finance climate and biodiversity projects worldwide. Our aim is also to strengthen our implementing organizations and funding institutions in their role as agents of change. And this is why we offer a wide range of capacity development measures, and today's webinar is one of them. So let me quickly introduce you to today's agenda. First, we will explain why we talk about this topic. So why results-based project management and not any other type of project management. Then we will take a look at the different terms, objective, outcome, output, and the effect of your projects on different levels. After that, we have prepared a little exercise for you. And of course, we also have time for question and answers. We planned a short break, so hopefully we'll stay on time so that we can all enjoy our break. After the break, we will speak about indicators, so how you can actually monitor your progress and measure your results. Last but not least, we will also cover the topics of baseline, target value, and means of verification. And at the end, again, we will have some time for questions, but as I've said, please feel free to always type questions in the chat so we can already collect them and then answer them all together at the end. Okay, having said that, I think I will almost hand over to my colleagues. As a very short check-in, we can unfortunately not do a whole round of introductions with you, our participants, but I would quickly like to show you where you all come from or might come from. Here you can see a map actually of all our current projects in the funding line international calls. So as you can see, we have by now selected 195 projects in 60 countries. This is call 1 to 6, and I think most of you are probably from our 6th call and are currently in our in-depth review phase, but some of you might be with us also already for some time, so it's good to have you here as well for a refresher webinar. Okay, wonderful. So now I hand over to my colleague Vincent, who will introduce you to today's topic.
Thank you very much, Karin, for that very good introduction of today's webinar. And as Karin has mentioned, I know we have participants participating from different parts of the globe. So good morning, good afternoon, depending on which part of the globe you are from. In this session, we want to see what is results-based project management, and to the extent that we want to understand how does it affect our projects as IKI Small Grants, and why do we need to use results-based project management in our management of the IKI Small Grants projects. I know this is not a new term for many of us who've been in the project management or the development scope for many years. And perhaps we are not hearing about this term results-based project management for the first time. So just to kick us off, our understanding of results-based project management is that it is the design of projects literally from the end to the beginning. And as we do this, we have to be very clear about our results, and especially also our intentions to achieving the results. So the clarity about the results that we want to achieve as projects, and as well as our intentions to achieving these results, must be very clear from the very beginning as we plan or we do planning to execute our projects. So, as I said earlier on, for us as IKI Small Grants, we are very keen to use results-based project management as a tool in carrying out our project implementation. And therefore, just to reiterate that at the very beginning, at the planning stages of project implementation, it's very important that as projects, we are very clear on our intentions. And also, we are also very clear about the results that we want to achieve at the end of the day. And therefore, what you see on your screen is just an illustration of when do we need to apply results-based project management as projects. So you can see already at the planning stage, we should already have in our minds the intentions and the results that we want to achieve. And not forgetting that we need to put in place adequate or very prompt implementation and monitoring frameworks. This will help us also to ensure that we can track activities, we can track our indicators, even as we do the project implementation. And then also critical to this is the monitoring framework, as well as also the evaluation, because at some point as projects, we will be expected to carry out the evaluation so that you can gauge whether as a program or as a project, you are on the right track with your implementation. So with projects, our aim always is to achieve positive changes in regards to the problems that we are trying to address as society or as projects in whichever sector we are working with. So therefore, the design and the plan should be very well intended to these changes and also very alive to the objectives that we want to achieve at the end of the day. And just to see from our context, from the context of implementation of IKI Small Grant projects, what does this now translate to? So quite often you'll come across some of these terms you see on your screen. You'll come across the terms like outputs, input, impact, results, of course, goals and objectives. So for us, I think we have to be very clear, because as a project or as a program, what we really look into mostly is that our programs or our projects, we emphasize on output. Also, we also emphasize on the outcome and as well as impact. So I know these are terms that normally people use interchangeably depending on which project or which donor you're working for. But at least for us, we are very clear about what we want you to focus on as projects in IKI Small Grants. And just to highlight this, if you look at your application templates, the guidelines are very clear, especially on section 3, where now we talk about the project logical framework. So for us, we are very keen to see that the outputs are very well clearly defined. And also your activities are also well stipulated, as well as your indicators. Later on, my colleague will also talk about how we set indicators correctly during the program implementation. And therefore, it's important or it's prudent that you are able to define clearly what your outcome as a project is, or what you anticipate to achieve as an outcome with the project. but also you have also to set, normally we require that you set one outcome, which is very clear, but also set 3 to 4 main outputs that will help you achieve this desired outcome. Then we also expect you to elaborate very clearly on your activities, or rather the inputs that will help you also towards achieving your defined outcome. So just to look at the scope of this, just by definition, what comes to your mind when you think about results in a scenario of a project management? So for us, results will define the changes in situations or behavior that will occur as a consequence of our interventions. And as such, we have to be very alive of the interventions that we intend to achieve, because nevertheless, at the end of the day, depending on your plans, the outcomes or the results can be positive and sometimes can be negative. So most of the cases, nobody would anticipate to have negative outcomes. And that's why we have to be very clear at the very beginning on our intentions as we plan to execute our projects or programs, so that we are very clear on the results that we want to achieve. As we all know that the results of your projects will be the consequences of your work, sometimes whether intentional or not. But then for us, we are especially trying to advise you that when you're designing your programs or projects, you have to be very intentional about what you want to achieve. And as such, we want to as much avoid negative outcomes. And for this case, we normally do what we call risk assessments, and also ensure that we fill out what we call the safeguard systems, just to ensure that we eliminate negative impacts as much as possible. So in our context, again, different people define results differently based on the results logic that you're using. So for us, as a program, I think our focus mostly, the results in our context will refer to both impact, outcome, and outputs. So some people only define results at the level of impact and outcomes, but as we go deep down and also include outputs as we define the results in this context. Just as we said that during your project or program implementation, we want to see how the objective, outcome, and outputs affects different levels of your project planning or implementation. And therefore, if you look at our staircase here, the results staircase, you can see already how the different terms affect the outcome of your project. So at the impact level, what we envisage is that there will be some changes in the society as a result of carrying out the project or project implementation. But also at the outcome level, we expect that the target group living conditions will change, and also that the target group also changes behavior as a result of the implementation of the project. Also, we also expect that at the end of the day, the attitudes from the target groups will be changing as a result of the program, as well as also they'll be able to acquire new sets of skills. Then if you look at the output level, our thinking is that the target group at the end of the day will accept offers that are there, and also that the target groups are reached by the program. And lastly, that the activities planned are all carried out. So that will influence how we structure our output at that level, and also previously, as I spoke about, the outcomes and finally the impact. So this is a systematic logic that has to be well arranged if we want to really achieve our desired impact, as earlier stated. So as IKI Small Grant projects, we are very keen on this, and therefore we urge you to always be very keen as you set out your outcome so that you are able to achieve the desired impact. So looking at your screen now, you will see what we call the results chain. And as you can see here, the results chain includes the input activities, which defines our how, and also outputs and outcomes, which speaks to our what we want to achieve. And then finally, why or what, for what reason. So that is the impact level. You will realize that during the project implementation, you have to invest on your time, you have to invest on human resources, sometimes financial resources. So these are the inputs that we require. So you use these inputs also to define the activities. And most importantly is that this will define the next level of what kind of outputs do we envisage, which therefore will lead to our outcome, and lastly, the impact of the overall project. So just as an example, though this is not from any of our projects, but it's just an example that will speak to a situation of a river which is has some untreated sewage running into it from households. And then we just want to look at how then do we define different levels of project activities. I mean, starting from project activities, inputs, outputs, outcome, and also impact. So looking at this example, you find that we first of all look at the initial situation. And at the initial situation, we find that there is an untreated household sewage, and this sewage runs from the tannery and pollutes the river, which therefore threatens the health and the well-being of the residents around this river ecosystem. So for this particular project, or for this particular example, at the impact level, what do we want to achieve? So we want to achieve a more improved quality of the water at the river. And then that will lead us to the outcome. So the outcome that we will envisage here is that we need to have less of this untreated waste or discharge going into the river. And because of this outcome, you see that we set clearly our outputs. And one of the outputs is that there will be need to train of the staff members to follow the protocol of safe disposal of chemicals. Also, second to that, we need to ensure that the residents are also made aware of their roles regarding the conservation of this river. So you can see we are very clear about our outputs as well as our income, as well as our outcomes, so that we can be able to achieve what is our impact, or what we've designed as our project impact in this context. So therefore, looking at this already, I think this gives you the picture based on how your project is structured. So you can already see whether this is the logic that you followed in coming up with your impact statements, the outcome statements, outputs, inputs, and also setting your activities. So as we come to the end of this, it is critical to note that results-based project management forms the basis of project implementation, especially in the modern world. And therefore, it is critical to put in place very well structured monitoring and evaluation systems that are able to guide you through. So for instance, if you look at the slide here, you see that we have monitoring on this other side and also the evaluation. And so the monitoring aspect will help you to assess the progress towards your objective. It will also help you to develop a monitoring plan with clearly set indicators so that you are able to track at every level of implementation how you're progressing. The monitoring tool will also help you so that you're continuously during the project implementation period, you're able to use it to track activities, and therefore you're able to report back whether you're on track or not. And this is also normally used, or it's important for the project teams to have this monitoring tool during the project implementation. On the other hand, evaluation is very critical for us since it will enable us to, analyze our results and also continuously monitor the data from within and also external sources. And it can also enable us to carry out a comparison between indicators before and after the project. So good to notice that evaluations are normally time-bound. So we normally carry out evaluations mostly at the mid-term level or at the end of the project. Then this is mostly for internal and can also be for external use. So therefore, for monitoring and evaluation will be very critical, especially for project steering. For project teams, for those who've been in the project management for the longest, this is very critical, especially for those who are steering the project. You'll definitely need a very good monitoring and evaluation matrix for you to be able to see how you're progressing in terms of your activities and also to monitor and always track your indicators. At this time, maybe we can now give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you have from your end before we go to the next presentation, please.
Okay, great. We have a little exercise. I hand back over to Vincent. Vincent, please go ahead.
Thank you, Karin. Thank you, Karin, for that. And we are sorry for that small technical hitch that occurred. So as you can see from your screen already, we have a little exercise for you based on the presentation that we've just had. And therefore, we just want to gauge your understanding on how can we set proper project outcomes, as well as also project outputs. And therefore, if you look at your screen, we have a number of examples. And on my left side, the first example, 1A, from the outcome side, is that the national malaria response is improved. And the B part of it is that malaria prevention practices are adopted by target group. So I just want you to go to the chat box and just put in what you think is the right or the right outcome for that matter. Then number 2 is a part of it is that 50 coffee farmers reduce their carbon dioxide emissions by operating biogas digesters. And the B part of it is that training for 50 coffee farmers on operation and maintenance of biogas digesters are implemented. So I also want you to pick the one that you think is the correct one. Just put your answers in the chat box. We'll look at them. The third part of the exercise based on the outcomes is that a part of it is that at the end of the project, 100% of community members have access to drinking water within the range of 150 meters from their homes. The B part of it says that at the end of the project, 80% of community members from a minimal sample of 200 people consider that the new water point responds to their need for drinking and supply of the water. Then when we go to outputs, we can also gauge your understanding, whether you understand how to set the outputs of the project. So number 4A, at the output level, we are talking about more people use mosquito nets when sleeping, particularly babies who are at higher risk during the rainy season. And then part B of it, we are talking about availability, access to, and promotion of mosquito nets among target groups are or have increased. You can also choose the one which is well framed. And lastly, 5A, that 50 coffee farmers know how to operate and maintain biogas digesters. And the B part of it is that coffee farmers are trained to use biogas digesters. So just take time, look through, and then please give the right answers based on the two combinations, both for the outcome and also the output level.
Okay, we have some answers now. Maybe Vincent, you can release our participants.
So on the outcomes, you can see that the right answer is 1B. And the reason is that if you look at the two, 1A is not specific and therefore is not measurable. But if you look at 1B, it is very specific. It talks about a target group and therefore it can be measured. So on the second one, 2A is the right answer. So if you chose 2A, you can clap for yourself. This is because 2B is more of an output indicator. I can see somebody clapping for themselves. The third one, as you can see from your screen, 3B is the correct answer. This is because the 3A has no defined sample. And if you look at the 3B, you are very clear that 80% of the sample size, which is 200, is where we'll we'll measure from. So this is very definitive. It's very well defined. Lastly, when we cross now to outputs, so 4A and 4B, 4B is the right output. 4A is it's kind of too long and it's not clear. It lacks clarity. So the use of mosquito nets is more of a behavioral change, and therefore is an outcome. So the last one, the right answer is 5B. 5A, sorry. This is because 5B is not specific enough. So 5A talks about 50 coffee farmers, and then 5B just talks about coffee farmers. So the right answer is 5A. So if you got all the answers right, please, you can still clap for yourself.
You can also clap for trying, we all learn together. So by making mistakes, we get better.
Yeah. So I think this gives us the picture of how well we can set our outcomes, as well as also the project outputs. So this example, I think we are all now reading from the same page when it comes to how we set project outcomes and also project outputs.
So we would move on to the next topic, which is about indicators. We just had this question about how to monitor progress and results. So I will hand over to my colleague Oliver now, who will introduce you to this topic.
Yeah, thank you very much, dear Karin. I hope everybody can hear me. Very fine. And now we are coming to the second part of our presentation. You all learn very well now about the outcome and the outputs and the formulation, but still we don't know how to measure them exactly, right? So now the second part will be how to measure our results, monitoring progress and measuring results. So this is all about indicators. You're all aware of indicators, of course, and it will be a pleasure now to guide you through this second part of the presentation. My name is Oliver Schlein. I'm Technical Project Manager here at IKI Small Grants, and yeah, my responsibility is to supervise technically our projects, also especially the logical frameworks of our projects, the indicators, and the respective metrics. So let's see what we can learn here about the indicators. Indicators are signs that something has changed. It's something about a transformation. So to put it very, very simply, from the caterpillar to the butterfly, yeah, there's this transformation, metamorphosis, and something has changed. And this is exactly what indicators are measuring. Indicators help you indeed to provide information on the progress being made by a project and on whether it is going as planned. To find out also if you're still on track, on course with the project implementation, and if the objectives you've identified are still possible to reach during the implementation. This is very important. And finally, also to determine whether a certain situation or event has taken place during the implementation. So this is a short introduction. Now we are coming to a graph using indicator throughout our project cycle. The project cycle, as all of you are aware, of course, include the following phases or periods. The project planning, which I suppose most of you have already done for your projects, of course. Planning, then the implementation. Many of you will already have started the project implementation. And afterwards, also the evaluation. Also during the project implementation, you will always do already a phase of evaluation, for example, for the annual narrative reports, where you also have to report on the indicators. Indicators are useful, therefore, throughout the project cycle. During the planning phase, ask always yourself the following questions. This is an important part. Which project objectives do we want to and are able to observe regularly? So define indicators during the planning phase. How do we determine that progress is being made and ultimately that our project has had the intended results which we were planning? If you use words such as improved or empowered, which we often find in our project proposals, indeed, which are submitted to IKI Small Grants, then you would have to define also what you mean with an improvement, or what do you mean by empowerment and how you want to measure it. So it's in general not recommended by our team to use words like, in generally, something has improved or something is, or somebody or some groups are empowered. So you have to specify it and also to explain how to measure it. For the project implementation, indicators are an important tool for overseeing the general progress of the implementation. Learning and management are important here. With the help, it can be determined whether the project is reaching the objectives identified at the various levels which you are focusing at your project. So basically, you are cross-checking the outputs and also the outcomes which you have set before. So this is the project cycle. And afterwards, the evaluation of your achievements will take place, as already said, annually in the annual narrative reports, and of course, after finalizing your project. All of you have surely heard about the SMART indicators, which is a very, very common term here in development cooperation and in general in project implementation. What is a good indicator? They have to be smart, which means they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. SMART stands for all these criteria, indeed, for indicators. And when we are checking geological framework, we are indeed also looking for these SMART criteria. Specific means an indicator is specific when it is precisely worded and measurable. So we don't need any general or vague descriptions like something has improved or has increased, which we often find indeed in project proposals. These are only helpful if indicators contain a baseline and target values. So we have to know where you start and where you want to end after the project finalizes. They would also need a definition, what improvement or increase would mean, and how the project would measure this. Furthermore, it's often quite hard to measure an increase or an improvement in general. Yeah? So you have to be more specific here. Specific indicators should never combine several issues. They should not be multi-dimensional. So in many sketches or many preliminary project proposals, we see many different things being put into one single indicator, and then it's getting confusing and it's not easy anymore to measure this indicator. And it also should not be located at different results levels. They should not be multi-level indicators. Otherwise, the situation to which the measurable change applies would be very unclear, and it's very difficult finally to get the things measured. So smart indicators, here you see a small checklist. In IKI Small Grants in general, we really want you to use indicators that can easily be measured by your projects. This is very important, of course. You should have the ownership and begin with the indicators, your project implication, so you feel safe to measure them and to be sure about the results which you are achieving, of course. Sometimes we have big IKI projects or programs that conduct normally pre and post tests to measure the level of knowledge increase for the participants or trainings of workshops. The participants fill out, for example, a questionnaire before the workshop or the measures and afterwards, and then you can somehow measure the increase of the knowledge. But this method projects can measure the knowledge specifically for the target group. But if you, as a smaller project, IKI Small Grants project, have the capacity to do so, you're more than welcome to introduce this kind of measurement, for example, for capacity development measures. But it can also be totally sufficient to only measure the number of trainings or participants if you currently do not have the capacities for a more comprehensive data collection. So that's a checklist for the indicators. It is more practicable. It is a good idea while developing a project proposal to keep the following checklist in mind with each indicator. Is the indicator specifically and precisely worded? Was care taken to ensure it was neither multi-level nor multi-dimensional? Does the indicator have a baseline and a target value? We'll come to this point later on. Is the effort involved in examining the measured values reasonable in relation to the relevance of the indicator and the overall budget of the project? The budget has to be realistic, of course. Is the indicator itself realistic, and was the target value that is to be achieved estimated in an objective manner? Is the indicator relevant for measuring the main dimensions of the result? All these points have to be considered carefully. Also, is the indicator located at the correct results level? So many criteria to be aware of for this implementation and for your planning, of course, as well. This graph only shows the hierarchy of the different levels. Vincent was already talking, of course, about the different levels. We have on top the outcome, later on the outputs, and below the activities. For the outcome and also for the outputs, you are formulating indicators, different indicators. And in the question and answer session, somebody asked already about the number of outputs. Are we only allowed to put 4 outputs? Here in the graph, you can only see 3 outputs. Indeed, 2 outputs are obligatory for us. We get many proposals which only have one output. This is definitely not enough. Yeah? So you should at least put 2 outputs into the logical framework and a plan for this output, of course, with specific indicators. If you put another one, a third or a fourth output, this is excellent also, but as Vincent and Karin explained, more outputs would be too much, and then it's getting complicated, and you also don't have the time for the implementation then. But here in this example, we have 3 outputs. On top, you see the outcome. Usually we have 2 outcome indicators, which are directly measuring the outcome. Afterwards, we have here 2 output indicators for each output. So altogether 6 in this example, and below the different activities. The activities, which are usually more numerous, of course, so it can be 3 up to 4 or 5 activities per output, are feeding directly into the output formulation. Each output is measured by 2 indicators at least, and the output themselves are feeding into the outcome indicators. So this is about the hierarchy of this result chain, without going much into more detail. Very important is gender-sensitive indicators. I think most of you are also aware that for IKI and IKI Small Grants projects, also specifically, we are really asking for gender-sensitive indicators. So in the development sector, gender-sensitive indicators become more and more important indeed. There's an increasing evidence that gender plays an important role in all aspects of climate and environmental policy in its causes, effects, and the responses also to the climate crisis. It should be noted that the observed gender differences should be seen in the context of specific local norms, of course, and the societies and responsibilities and the dynamics in society. So in some countries, it might be easier to implement high ambitions or high standards of a gender-sensitive indicator than in other countries. Yeah, this is a matter of society and the history of the countries. But we encourage all IKI Small Grants projects to use gender-sensitive indicators. They should be disaggregated by the sex, which means the indicator findings are reported separately for men and women, which requires sex disaggregated data collection. They should be gender-specific. The indicator measures an initiative that is targeted at women, such as women's cooperative or female households members, for example, should be implicitly gendered, which means the indicator addresses an issue which is of specific relevance to women and girls, could be, for example, safety for public transport, and it should be chosen by women rather than men during the planning progress. The indicator is chosen by female community members or by the female project staff and reflects the specific needs and priorities of the women. So this has to be taken in mind. Here you see a short table for formulating indicators. You have to put into the indicator who or what is doing something. For example, here the municipal government, or 4 farmers cooperatives, or 100 hectares of deforested land. What is the change or the desired effect? We are putting into the indicator the municipal government adopts policy, the farmers apply soil conservation measures, and the deforested land are managed sustainably. In what? To promote rainwater harvesting to residential properties, or to improve drought or drought resilience, or to use a silvopastoral approach for sustainable forest management. And you have to also to put in the information by when. For example, after the first 3 months of the project or by the end of the project. Very, very often in the project proposal, we find by April 2026 or by September 2028. Yeah? And this is very risky because usually we are facing delays during project implementation. The delay is already starting because most of the projects will not start by the foreseen month, but we will have some delay for the contract preparation and some other factors. So the project might start later, the contract might be later, might be delayed. And during the implementation, you will also face some external problems or some internal problems maybe in your institution. So it's never wise to put an exact month into the metrics, into the logical framework, but better an estimation after 3 months of the project, after half a year, and so on. So the selection of each indicator should be based on the availability of data and its relevance to the objective and the result. Don't pick too many indicators for each result, please. So choose the most important or strategic ones, and choose and develop indicators with your partners. This is also important. For example, governmental institutions or academic institutions, or CBOs, community-based organizations. Agree on the data collection and responsibilities, including the frequency of the measurement, and involve also the beneficiaries and the target groups in the choice of the relevant indicators. Go into communication with them. So don't exclude the target groups or the partner institutions which are participating. Be clear on whether your indicators are annual, cumulative, or they have other qualities. So this regarding the implementation, the formulation of the indicators. Now we are going back to our example, which Vincent already mentioned. So the overall situation here is untreated household sewage and runoff from the tanneries pollute this river ecosystem and threaten health and well-being of the residents and the whole ecosystem. Indeed, it could be a biodiversity focused project, for example, from the IKI portfolio. So the outcome formulation, which Vincent already described, would be less untreated household wastewater is discharged into the river. What would be a good outcome indicator formulation now? In this case, the bacterial pollution load at the main drains has decreased by 25%. This is something that can be measured by scientific methods, and is very reliable. On the output level, so for output 1, tannery staff members follow protocols for safe disposal of chemicals, which Vincent already presented. It would be a good output indicator that 20 tannery staff members disaggregated by sex, right? You can put male, how many males and females staff members have completed 2 weeks of intense technical training. This is an output indicator which is addressing capacity development or learning process, knowledge. For the second output, residents are increasingly aware of the role in local river conservation. We have an output indicator. A door-to-door campaign has informed 500 households about proper maintenance of septic tanks and sanitation facilities. This is an excellent indicator addressing awareness raising among the population, among the residents. So this is an example. And now we are coming to the second part of my part from the presentation. It's still missing to define baseline, target values, and means of verification. These terms you also know always from the logical framework of your projects. Baseline, target value, and means of verification are required for indicators on all levels, indeed. So no indicator without measurement. It's not enough, of course, to formulate the indicator. You also have to think of the numbers, where you are starting and also where you are ending after 2 years, usually in the case of IKI Small Grants project. So what is a baseline? Baselines have multiple functions. They are formative, providing a basis for project design and for the project's concept, and steering, providing values for measuring milestones. So in other words, a baseline is a measure of the situation before the project starts. And it doesn't have to be always 0. In many cases, indeed, it is 0, because it's basically the starting point of your project and of all your activities, all your technical interventions. But something could have been done already earlier by other projects, by your own institutions, or it could be totally by other projects from other donors. So, for example, if you're starting protecting a rangeland area, some parts might already be protected. So you're not starting at 0 hectares, maybe, but you're starting at 500 hectares maybe, and increasing the protected area. Or if you want to train a part of the population, for example, women, yeah, about sustainable cooking, there might already be from a previous project 100 women having knowledge about this and practicing already this sustainable cooking. So you're starting maybe at 50 or 100 and not at 0. Yeah, so you have to do very, very good research before you're putting these numbers. Why is it important? A lot of difficulties can arise in the course of the project, which are not foreseen because there is no baseline and no estimation of past and present trends. So you're hanging basically in the air. You don't know where you started your project and you don't know where you want to go. And no real preparation of the monitoring and evaluation system. This is also very important. But in the frame of IKI Small Grants project, we have the system annual narrative reports where you have to report on the interim status of your indicators. So it is a current situation before your project intervenes indeed. This about baselines. So other important terms is what is a target. A target is a desired ending point for each indicator. It's a contrary to the baseline. The baseline you sometimes also need for scientific indicators. You have to do a survey in the beginning to define the starting point. But what is a target? Where you want to end up with your indicator. And this has to be reached at the end of the project. In the final report, you have to report on these values. Yeah? So a target is a desired ending point of each indicator. Target values should be disaggregated where relevant, for example, by sex, geography, or age of the target group. And they should also be time specific. It should be clear when the target is expected to be met. Tips for setting targets. Targets can be powerful project management tools, of course. What gets measured gets also managed. If you don't know what you're measuring, it's getting difficult during project implementation, but they need to be treated with some caution, of course. You have to be realistic. If you put some very unrealistic target values, of course, you will get into trouble only after the first year, but even more after the second year when you are finding out, oh, this was a bit too realistic. We do not manage, for example, to put 1,000 hectares under protection, yeah? Or we do not manage to get 5,000 people trained, yeah, in the frame of the project to exaggerate a little bit. Yeah. So what is a milestone? A milestone is a clearly defined interim result. We are not putting milestones into the logical framework in the case of IKI Small Grants, but into the Gantt chart, which is the chronological diagram you are also usually setting up to demonstrate in a graph, in a diagram, the whole implementation with the activities from month 1 to month 24, for example. Yeah? And here you put milestones, which is more for an internal monitoring system where you can celebrate, okay, we have reached this and that milestone before we get to the target. Yeah? So a simple example could be you have to conduct 5 workshops in 6 months, and then a suitable milestone could be the implementation of the first workshop within the second month. So you can celebrate then also after the third workshop, and then you're reaching your target after 24 months of implementation, for example. Now, what are means of verification? These you also find always in the logical framework for IKI Small Grants. And you have to put some proof there, some sources. Means of verification are reliable, relevant, and specific pieces of evidence for the correct fulfillment of your indicators. So they are data or sources to verify an indicator. So we can go back to our example. Less untreated wastewater is discharged into the Blue River here in this African example. The outcome indicator would be, as we already mentioned, the bacterial pollution load at the main drains have decreased by 25%. Now, how to put values for our baseline, for the target, and for the means of verification. The baseline would be 500 CFU, which is a value or an indicator to measure the pollution. It's called colony forming units, and below 1000 CFU per 100 milliliter of water are suitable for bathing quality. Yeah? So the baseline 5000 CFU is quite polluted, is dirty water, not suitable for bathing. The target value, bacterial load, less than 3500 CFU, which could be received by or gained by an expert opinion, maybe, which is realistic and which is possible maybe to reach during 2 years of implementation. How can you prove this? Means of verification, protocols of sample collection and sample analysis, GIS location data of sampling sites. So these are chemical samples and therefore scientific indicators, and it's very exactly and very good to measure. Just a comment, reports submitted to IKI Small Grants, like these annual narrative reports, are no means of verification. Yeah? So you cannot put here reports submitted to IKI Small Grants, because you can write indeed everything into the reports, but you have to have some direct original source, of course, some original proof, which could be the protocols from a chemical laboratory in this case, for example. Yeah? Now, from the outcome, going to the outputs and the output indicators in our example. Tannery staff members follow protocols for safe disposal of chemicals. The output indicator was 20 staff members have completed 2 weeks of intensive technical training. Baseline in this case is 0 because nobody was trained before the measure. Then 20 staff members are trained. Means of verification can be attendance sheets or certificates of participation. So this is very easy, very clear. For the second output, residents are increasingly aware about the role in local river conservation. This is this awareness raising indicator. And we had this door-to-door campaign informing 500 households about proper maintenance of septic tanks and sanitation facilities. Here the baseline would be 0 because no households have been informed before the project measure. The target value would be 500. It's also very easy. Means of verification would be photo or video documentation done by the project. Could be coverage in local media as well. Could be protocols of the households being informed. So these are all means of verification. Could also be videos, of course. The modern media, of course, also the social media networks offer indeed a lot of different opportunities here. So coming back to this figure or this diagram, which we had in the beginning, which Vincent presented us, I hope this input clarified a bit your doubts maybe, or your concerns, or your confused view maybe resulting this many different terms which you find in the literature, but also in the internet from different development cooperation agencies. So GIZ and IKI in general and our IKI Small Grants projects, we are working indeed with the outputs and the output indicators, and the higher level above the outcome indicators, and in general we are searching for the impact of our project, which the impact can be on the long term, also if the project has ended. When the project is finalized, we can make, of course, measurement of the output success and also of the outcome success, measuring our indicators, which hopefully have been designed wisely. But in most cases, we cannot see the impact. Right? If you are planting maybe 1,000 mangroves or terrestrial trees in your project, usually after 2 years, you don't know about the survival rate yet. Yeah, in a degree, in some way, maybe yes, you can see how many seedlings have survived after 2 years if they are being planted very early in the project implementation, but you still don't know how many will survive after 5 years, of course, or after 10 or after 20 years, which might have a long impact of the project on the environment, on the biodiversity, on the well-being of the people, on ecotourism, and so on. So the impact of your project can go on and on much, much longer than, of course, the outputs or the outcome which we are measuring with the indicators. So some other project might take up. This is also why we are asking always about sustainability of a project and also the scalability to scale it up on the national level or regional level, where you have much more impact, of course, if some other projects are taking up your methods or the final results of your project. And this is why you need the indicators and you need to measure them, because this is also important for communication, for reporting about your project on our IKI Small Grants website or on social media in your respective countries. You can only report on successful measures if you can measure them, and for this you need the indicators. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention. This was the second part, and I hope it clarified a bit the enormous problems or challenges maybe which you will have in formulating the perfect indicators on the output and outcome level. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Thank you for the input. Now we still have a few minutes left for your questions. Thanks again very much to Vincent and Oliver for the inputs. It was great having you here today, and we will share the recording shortly on the website. Thank you very much and have a nice day.